Hello, this is your host Will the Werewolf on Werewolf the podcast. We're on episode 71 and we're continuing with Jimmy the Wererat. Yes, the Wererat. I think we're on episode 71. So let me continue from last episode. Please go and listen to that if you can. Also, you can buy me a coffee from the link below in the description. That would be very nice of you. Also, my book is out there on Amazon. Finally got my autobiography out there. You can follow that link down in the description as well. Jimmy, the wererat, was sitting in front of me in his human form. I mean, I was hoping at some point that I would see the ratty side of him, to be honest. But hey, we all have to wait for the good things in life. Here is my unprecedented problem, Will. You see, I'm one of two. I was a twin to me mother and her lover. Daddy Dearest was the son of a bigwig in the town, and he had me, Mum, for what he would say is pleasure. Not hers, I don't think. She was what we call a housemaid in training at the time. I think that's the aristocracy had them there, not only for to train them, but to train the young lordlings before they took a wife. Maybe it gets it out of their system or something. Not unusual back then, Will. She had no want of the men, but you know how it is. He had the power over her life, and she was told by the other servants in the place that this constant rape was just part of the job. He briefly paused to take a mouthful of steak and ale pie. Bitterness did not register in the ratty eyes of the little man, but Bert, his posset, seemed even more uncomfy than usual. Days were different in the past. This was well before the Me Too movement, you see. He returned to his meal while giving me time to digest what he just said. Being a servant and a thing for the young lordling's pleasure came hand in hand. As you can imagine, the last thing on anyone's mind during a good raping was whether or not the lass would have a kiddie. If the lass were up the duff in the past, she would be just paid to have it removed, or would be paid off to just disappear into the world, or she would just fucking disappear, if you understand what I mean. I nodded as I bit into my beer-battered cod. Crispy goodness, and a great story were a wonderful thing. The lordling had done the unfathomable, though. He had fallen for his position, and he wanted her to be with him and do the honourable thing by her. This did not go down with Daddy Dearest, as you can imagine, and he had to do something about the problem obviously being her. He pointed with his knife at me. I could see a wave of brooding anger beneath his unlimited cool now. He placed his cutlery down to make what to him must have been a very important point. Mammy Dearest was taken away in an early morning horse-drawn cab, almost beaten to death in the back streets of somewhere lonely and out of the way. I say almost beaten to death. She survived the beating by calling upon something in the air. That thing in the air was the almost death of some rats close by to her at that exact moment. Apparently, poison or something was the reason that they were on the way out. He lifted his glass and took a short sip to clear his mouth and carry on. And now you understand this magic bollocks just by having him sat by you there, he smiled, lifting his glass to Fen. By someone, let's say, for want of a better word, miracle or something, the rats and me mam conjoined, and there we have it. A few months later, there was me and me brother, Edward. Me old mam is still about. I mean, bless her, she lives in Chelsea now and does the woman who do lunch thing. I mean, she's still in her early 30s to look at, and never been a beauty in that is, but she's me mam. The problem you see is Eddie. Me and him used to be like bosom buddies for centuries. We ran together and built us a fortune that we and our many bastard kids will have an awful time trying to spend in one lifetime. The thing is, Will, we fell out like. I won't go into the details. I mean, he was obviously in the wrong, but I have to get rid of him in such a way as me mam will never know. Yeah, I know, that sounds ridiculous. But it was that way. Mam means all to me, you see. I need yous because he's a lot like me. Well, he's me twin, so I know him through and through. He's very difficult to trick, hurt and kill. And it's something like you, mate, that is the only thing that I could think that could actually do it. Because he was talking and not eating, I'd finished my food much quicker than he had. I was now sitting and sipping the wonderful ale as I thought about what he just said. So, what do you think, Will? I was wondering what I could offer you for this job. I know you don't have no sentiment or any of them emotional bollocks, so I didn't think that just helping me out would be enough against someone who's a bit of a dick. I also know you ain't poor or bothered by money, so offering you that is no good. I was then going to offer you power, maybe business or status, but then I realised, unlike most of us, you're not bothered by that either. So I had to think of what on earth I could give you. It was actually Bert here, Bert waved a little ball, who came up with why you should do it. His reasoning being pretty straightforward. Eddie is going to be an utter bastard to do anything with. He is resourceful and as sharp as a very sharp thing. He does not fall for shit and has a survival mindset of a very, very bright rat. No offence, Bert. Bert shrugged his little shoulders. If you and Fen could kill the bastard, then that being able to do that difficult thing would be the greatest reward I could give you. Also, I was going to bet you 10p that you couldn't do it. I sees you as a true artist, Will. It would be an amazing piece of art to finish Eddie in some grand and brutal way. The more horrific, the better from my point of view. He again put his cutlery down and held my own eye contact whilst masticating. Masticating, that's chewing, people. God. Both him and Bert were now staring ever so intently at me. I turned to Fen and I could see by his face that he knew that I was thinking. Obviously, we could not say anything even telepathically here, as Bert and Jimmy, for some reason, probably something to do with quantum, could hear us. He had me, really. The only reason I tended to do anything was that I wanted to, and most things in life are not that challenging for a werewolf, to be honest, apart from walking past a bookshop. I find that an incredible difficult thing to do, but that had nothing to do with this moment. Well, Jimmy, that sounds like a very sad story of family injustice and stuff, but as you know, I'm not a family man. Bert has a handle on my reasoning, though. You've intrigued me as how hard it would be to sort out the Eddie situation. I mean, I'm a werewolf and I'm pretty bright, so would it be that much of a challenge? Will, yous are a very scary creature, he said, pointing a ringed finger at me. I mean, finding yous and getting information on you had been a great deal of work. I know a lot, though. I even have those fucking army records about you that do not exist. He did the conspirational nose tap thing in. My ability to know things is second to none, except, of course, to Eddie's. I've seen what you have done around the world. I've seen that you can deal with most difficult and dangerous situations. People, your resume is very impressive, and I bet it only documents a small part of what you've actually achieved in reality. I can see that you're like a challenge and you fear very little. I did not want any part in the process. I don't want to know what you're doing. If you walk away from this meeting telling me that you would do this thing, then in my head, I would assume that it was done. I will pay your expenses and provide you with any information you need. Does it sound like a fun project for you? He finally asked. I checked out Fenrir, who smiled a toothy wolfy smile at me, and it seemed that we were both in the kind of mood to say yes. Yes, I told him. Only on one proviso, though. Jimmy waved his hands. I get to meet your brother and hear from him. Jimmy looked confused. He considered this whilst finishing the last of his drink. Do you know, Will? I think that you'll hear from him anyway. I know everything he is doing, so you'll undoubtedly know that he's happening here. We have many tiny ears and eyes and a world to watch over each other as we work and play. I suppose it will come down to you, like, who you like most, as to who you will work for. I do warn you though, Will, I am also a very difficult creature to harm and kill, so if you come after me, you will have it as hard as me as you do for Eddie. Maybe you should do us both, he laughed. The humour slipped from his face as quickly as it arrived. Please tell me your conclusion within the week. You seen how easy it was for me to find you? Just speak my name and I will give you an answer. He smiled now, a knowing smile and a threatening smile. Speak at any time and I will get the message. He then stood up and waited for me to do the same. He'd somehow dismissed me as I rose and shook his hand. Fen, it was nice to meet you, mate. Not many get the chance to see you in the unflesh, as it were. Will, it was grand to see you, and I hope that it all works itself out in the wash. We left the pub as Jimmy sat back opening the Financial Times and crossing his legs. Mr. Beige gave us a little unexpected wave at the door and returned to some kind of proprietary thing at the bar. His man, the chauffeur, was outside the door, and unlike all the films, he was not having a sneaky fag. He was sitting looking at his phone. There was a lot of moaning and lashes going on in the background of the video he's watching, but he was not unabashed when we briefly made eye contact. He just went back to his specialised porn of choice. I wanted to get some distance from Jimmy before I had to chat with Fen, even telepathically. I thought that Bert might be in the area or something. I was not sure about how much he could watch me. As I arrived at the car park across the road from the pub, I saw Mr. Beige sitting on the bonnet of my car. That was amazing if so, because he would have to have passed me or teleported or something in order to get to the car before me. He was wearing a bomber jacket, and it must have been made out of skins of an entire herd of cows, and he was chewing a cocktail stick as he stared at me through those piggy eyes. As I got closer, it became apparent that this wasn't Mr. Beige. It was Mr. Beige, but not, if you know what I mean. Who knew that these monstrosities came in at least packs of two? As I got to the car, he stood up and did the fine old muscle thing of a short loom over me by going to the tips of his toes and sitting back down on his heels. I stopped. Fen stopped. We both stopped a couple of yards away from the brute. Hi. That's my paintwork and body panel that you're scuffing and crushing. Is there anything I can help you with, or is it a simple lack of respect for others' property? I asked him. He said nothing, but unfolded his ham-like arms from across his chest and smiled as he did the cool knuckle-cracking thing. I watched, completely entranced by this. It was great. "The boss wants to see yous," it said. That was all it said, just that. Obviously a man of few words. He probably could only use so many a day before his brain overheated and he had to sit still for a couple of hours. Fen looked at me and I looked at Fan. I stayed quiet, thinking that he was going to elaborate on this further. He didn't. He just stood very solidly in front of the car and waited, looking at me. You could tell he was very good at standing around. He was the kind of person who got it down to an absolute fine art. He just didn't move. He just stood. The morning breeze playing gently with his extraneous eyebrow hairs. He truly was a behemoth of the past and a thing of beauty to behold. I eventually had to break the silence. "I am guessing that you work for Eddie Simpkins," I said. "I am guessing that he sent you here for an invitation to meet him and chat about an offer that would be good for us both." It nodded. Again we stood there waiting for a response, but there was nothing. He was obviously expecting to stand there until we did agree or something through, I don't know, loom pressure. This was too much fun. I had to meet this character's boss as well. I looked at Fen and nodded, and he nodded back. "Yes, of course. I would love to meet him. That would be wonderful," I concurred. "Here." A massive hand that looked like a plate of sausages passed me what was now a slightly grubby business card. "He says you needs to phone him to organises it, and I have to say thank you for your time." Brian Beige had seemed to be reading the words from some storage place in the back of his mind. That was, of course, if he could fucking read. "Thank you," I told him, putting the card carefully in my pocket. "Please tell your boss that you did very well and you did what you were told." I smiled. In response, I got an almost pleasant smile or present grimace, I didn't know which. He then moved himself from the front of the car to let us drive away. Fen was mesmerised by this man, and I had to give him a mental shout to get him in the car. We started the engine and sat there momentarily watching Brian stand. He had not taken his eyes off me, and he seemed to have become part of the landscape. I put my, I'm going to show off again a bit here, newly bought 1975 Porsche Carrera into gear and drove away, briefly looking ahead to find the exit. By the time I looked back in the mirror, Brian had gone. Maybe he was something supernatural as well. Maybe Billy and Brian Beige were something like the spirits of old Cockney muscle. I hope so. And that's the end of part 2 of the Wererat. Hope you enjoyed it. Buy me a coffee. Buy my book. Do loads of nice things. Thank you. Bye.